they nag-backfire talaga yung during the 2016 elections, the way that the liberals had painted themselves as what they call the gente decente, as opposed to the equivalent of what Hillary Clinton called the deplorables, right? In the Philippines, that really backfired. Basically, what we saw was in fact a populist embrace by lower class, middle class Filipinos of the kind of politics, populist politics that was being promoted by Duterte. And I think why have the big question is, why have Filipinos, in fact, moved away from this espousal of traditional liberal values like due process, okay? And good governance, no? Kasi these are good governance, due process, anti-corruption. This is what the yellow, the yellow factions ran for so many years until 2016, and still beyond 2016. Okay, so, and I think what has happened there is, that basically the liberal, I'm not talking about the Liberal Party, but the liberal section of the Philippine elite just has not delivered in terms of, equality, in terms of economic development, in terms of social reform. There was a lot of talk about that, but never really delivered. And I think that's why people turned to the Marcoses and to the Dutertes
I
in
want to push on
2020,
that, Walden, no? Because obviously,
2022. Right.
yeah. So let's first talk about the liberals before we talk about progressives.
Yeah.
So obviously here we are all students of Antonio Gramsci, right? And the whole folks in Italy who were very critical of the liberal state that gave independence to Italy and some modicum of democratic representation, but there was no fundamental change in the political economy, modes of
Mhm.
production, and empowerment of the vast majority of masses in Italy. So when I read Gramsci, which I'm doing again, apparently
Mhm.
it's not only me, even Giorgio Meloni of Italy, the new fascists are also reading Gramsci, is this critic of the limitations of the liberal state, right? So the Edsa Revolution created not a revolutionary state, not a progressive, but created liberal state.
Mhm.
So what you're saying, the problem with the liberals is that the emphasis was on decorum, the emphasis was on procedurality, formal constitutionality, and most importantly, political rights like freedom of expression,
Sure.
assembly, etc.
Mhm.
But no fundamental focus on changing conditions of living, working conditions, income, wages, distribution. And I think that is one of the reasons, if not the main reason, that they find themselves so marginalized.
Well, yeah, it's not, I guess that there was a hypocrisy factor, because it did say that it was going to address these issues: corruption, agrarian reform, wealth inequality, but it did not deliver. So I think it's not so much that they did not promise in these areas, but they did not in fact deliver. So I think it was the
Why didn't they
combination.
deliver? Because my argument is maybe because they don't believe fundamentally in social justice. Because if you really believe in social justice in an economic sense, you would put in the work. I just felt they never put enough work. Just
No,
look at land reform issues,
definitely.
right?
No, definitely. And I just wanted to say here that I was part of the alliance with the Liberal Party back in 2009 to 2015. And we were pushing for agrarian reform that we really needed to complete it. But, it was, the Aquino administration, basically did not back us up. And we were pushing for a new agrarian reform law, and that was not there at all. But that's one thing. The other thing is that they just completely bought the neoliberal line about the way that the Philippines should become more market oriented, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, completely sort of revamped the Philippine state so that it became one of the most neoliberal states in the world. And I think the combination of lack of commitment to social justice and buying neoliberalism, the buy into neoliberalism, sort of created this sense among people that they were not really being affected by any sort of positive reforms by this liberal administration. So that when Duterte came along and the Marcoses came along a second time, they were ready for the message that the yellows have not delivered and trust us.
Right. I mean, obviously, the hypocrisy is the human part, but for me, I think there's an ideological deficiency with
Sure,
liberalism per
sure.
se. I mean,
Yeah,
it's apparently there's a rot there. The rot there,
yeah,
the blindness to the massive transformation you need on these socioeconomic fronts.
sure,
I won't go
definitely.
as far as saying changing modes of production. That would be a bit too Marxist. But even from a social democratic standpoint, I see huge deficiencies there. Now, obviously, Walden, you made a perfect transition to the final part of our conversation. Let's talk about economics, right? Because I think many of the in the Philippines, when it comes to political sentiments and culture, can be understood by economics, right? Um, I mean, if you just look at the deterioration, for instance, of media, I'm a man of media too. I've worked in all of the top major media outlets in this country. Um, a lot of that is driven by the dynamics of capitalism, right?
Sure.
And the fact that now you have social media and influencers competing for eyeballs, it has created even more challenges for media. I look at the education sector. Both of us have been part of that. We have both taught at the top universities in this country. Again, you see the new liberalization of universities, that your value as an academic is your, I don't know, Google Scholar citation. It's like how many Scopus, whatever, ISI, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Things that, the
Sure.
Hannah Arendt would have laughed at if she
Mhm.
faced that 50, 60 years ago. We see this new liberalization in every, meaning essentially turning everything into content and monetization, which is even worse in the social media world
Mhm.
as we speak, Walden. But obviously, you can also understand new liberalism in a sense that the Philippines is not creating sectors that create sustainable growth. The few sectors that have been creating growth, like business process outsourcing, are also slowing down. I deal a lot with these sectors, and now they're facing threat from artificial intelligence. The Vietnamese
Mhm.
apparently are getting onto the game when it comes to
Mhm.
the BPO industry. The Philippines has a very thin manufacturing sector and an almost miserable agricultural sector compared to our neighbors.
Sure.
Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand. I don't want to even talk about Japan, Taiwan. I mean, those guys are way ahead of us. Why do you think Walden has our country so bought into this really self-defeating neoliberal package? A package that is being rejected in the heart of neoliberalism, i.e., the United States, right? I mean, in the US, everyone talks about industrial policy, made in America, bringing back manufacturing. In
Sure.
the Philippines, how many economists do you know, Alden? Legit, like credible economists who say those things. The few economists out there who have a voice, well, then it's the same BS, right? Oh, just, be nice, good governance, follow. They have
Mhm.
nothing new to say. What the heck is going on, Walden? What is the sociology of economics in the Philippines and technocracy in the Philippines? Why are we in this mess?
Well, there are a number of factors that I try to address in my writings at this point in time. I think that some extent, um, um, the fight against the Marcos regime, the Marcos Senior regime, was sort of, um, uh, you know, carried out in the name of we have to break out monopolies, we have to break up cronyism, we have to break up this unhealthy links between business and the state. And the Marcos regime sort of represented that. And part of part of the spearhead of the fight against the corruption of the Marcos regime was precisely that, we had to break up government because government and business linkages under Marcos was, had created corruption. So there was that aspect of it. The other aspect of it, of course, is, that we had the World Bank and the IMF that basically approached the whole thing in the Philippines as, here is an opportunity for total neoliberal reform. And they got their opportunity, which is, just it's, this is what we'll do with respect to tariffs. This is what we'll do with respect to agriculture and industry. And basically you had very little opposition over there because a lot of the people
Yun nga
that
eh.
were in
That's what I want to
economic,
understand, Walden. Bakit
yeah,
sobrang pliant, sobrang willingly complicit yung ating technocratic elite while we see resistance
because
in other countries? Argentina is of
because
course the most dramatic one.
because on the one hand, the pressure of the World Bank and the IMF was very great, but on the other hand, many of our technocrats were educated in American universities like Harvard, the University of Chicago, et cetera, where economics was identified with neoliberalism, so that when they came back, it was like they were implementing God's plan. Okay. Uh, and what has happened is that they did not have the pragmatism of our neighbors, because our neighbors like Thailand, Malaysia, and others, they basically said, okay, let's have free market reform, but they actually did not practice what they preach.
It was
They
more
actually
performative, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
performative.
Play
Yeah,
the dog.
let's
Yeah.
be pragmatic. Let's not bring down tariffs. Let's. The important thing was they wanted to preserve their industry and their agriculture. What we had in the Philippines is, as you were very right, we had a doctrinaire, technocratic class that basically believed in neoliberalism and applied it with a vengeance, beginning with the Aquino administration, but especially during the Ramos administration. And it had the support of the World Bank, IMF, and the World Trade Organization. So the problem right now is that even industrial policy, which would involve a lot of creative state involvement, is something that they don't understand, because it does not fit into their paradigm of change. So now have a very conservative technocracy. The UP School of Economics really must be abolished because it's really just producing the same kind of neoliberal
There
thinking.
are my neighbors in Asia. Like you don't
Yeah,
attack our
yeah.
neighbors. Okay.
And in fact, during my speech on, if you were there, Richard, you heard my speech when I was awarded the
Right.
Amnesty International Human Rights Defender Award. I said that we really need people like Silito Habito and all of these neoliberals to be tried by to be
Now you're
tried just
attacking
like
my
Michel
neighbor on my
Cambisu and others.
newspaper's page. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Like, Walden,
So
you're really
basically,
in trouble here.
yeah, but basically what I was trying to say is that they're just as much a problem as human rights violators when you have them as, helping destroy the manufacturing base of the country, the agricultural base of the country, and leaving Filipinos with no other choice but to migrate to other countries. I mean, if you were, if an ordinary Filipino know what's wrong, okay? Manufacturing is dead, agriculture is dying, services are very weak at this point in time. The only place to go is abroad. That's an economy, that's a basket case. But our economists don't see it that way. They would want more and more free market at this point in time. Absolutely don't get the state involved in the economy in a productive way. And I think this is part of the problem. We have not learned what other people have learned in Malaysia, in Thailand, and others, which is that we must have very pragmatic economics that really concentrates on building up our manufacturing, industrial, and agricultural capacity and goes beyond the doctrine of free trade and free markets. This is what we lack at this point in time. And this is why until we have this intellectual revolution, it's we're headed down to more and more economic marginalization. Richard, the image that I use is uh,
Right.
in the Matrix. You have all of these people who are plugged into the Matrix, where they have this dream, that they're living in a fantasy world and they love it. Okay. And I think this is the same thing that we have in the Philippines right now. People are plugged into this neoliberal world of dreams, when the reality is something very different. And what you need to do is to unplug people from it. Okay. Unplug people from the Matrix, but that's not going to be very easy for us to do at this point.
Hold on. Building on that matrix thing, I mean, isn't there also a sociology in a sense of the fact that a lot of people have been running the Philippines and including its technocracy? Yes, some of them may have come from a humble background, but a lot of them are in very comfortable circumstances.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that we have a feudalistic culture coupled with American libertarian, I mean, like we got the worst of combination, right? Spanish haciendero culture, right? Um, American anti-state libertarianism of the late 19th century, right? All of these things created a very toxic ideology of the ruling class, if I can, let's call it the superstructure, right? And if you look at it, like a lot of these technocrats and all, a lot of these people in position of power, actually, well, they have very good lives, right? And for some reason, they don't seem to be very troubled by the fact that thanks to their policies or their contributions, directly or indirectly, vast majority of ating mga kababayan, they don't have even a basic dignified life. I mean, Walden, you know it. Dignity is a very important thing in other cultures. The whole Tunisian revolution, which became Arab Spring, started with the assault on the dignity of a vegetable vendor who could not accept being slapped around in front of everyone. Next thing he did was to self-immolate. The rest is history, right? We're seeing the reverberations until today with Assad falling in Syria. The Arab Spring is not over. For me, one of the things that always shocks me is just the complete lack of solidarity with the rest of the population. In fact, Walden, you are familiar with Latin America, a region we'll talk to. So that's also a region of mestizos, right? Creoles and all of that. Sometimes when I talk to the elite in the Philippines, not only do they look different from the average Filipino, a lot of them have, which cultural ethnic backgrounds, they talk as if they're not of the same people when they talk about the rest of the country. The way they talk to their drivers, their mates, to people around them, even to their managers. Um, I don't want to drop names, but I've heard even horror stories. Some of them I had the privilege of not meeting, but don't we have a singularly deracinated elite, if I can put it mildly, Walden, which may explain why parang wala silang pake that they never instituted the set of policies to correct past mistakes and put us on the path to sustainable growth like most of our neighbors. My sense is, right, from your own writings and works, if you look at the elite in Thailand, right? For everything we can say about Thailand, at least there was this sense of investment in the progress of the nation, the Thai nation, right? Regardless of their ideology. I would say to a certain degree, even Indonesia and Malaysia are along those lines. Singapore is way ahead of everyone else. Diba? There's a certain sociology of people in power in the Philippines. And I would say Harry Roque is like the caricature of that. Diba? Yung mga medyo nagkaroon ng privilege, the next thing you know, they're even more problematic than your old. Do you get what I'm saying,
Yeah.
Walden? I mean, I am becoming very sociological in my amateur way. I look at this, parang, baka naman there's something singularly wrong also with the mindset and the superstructure governing our ruling classes, and that's why we're in this mess.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. I think the sense of privilege is very strong in our elites. Our middle classes tend to look upward, and have adopt the same disdain towards the lower classes that our upper classes have. And I think that and then the policy of this country of having encouraged the export of labor has meant that so many people, instead of instead of staying in the country and working things out here, have taken the easy way out and left the country. Where many of the people who are leaving, from a whole range of classes are among, you know, the best of of our people, with professional skills and others, as well as, as well as our workers, So my sense is, that the policy of labor export as a mechanism for absorbing labor abroad has had very detrimental sociological and cultural consequences. Uh, because basically, when Filipinos are educated from primary grade on, they see themselves as really attaining skills so that they can apply these skills abroad. Okay. So, like, the destination point that is drilled into them from the very beginning is that
Vocational
they're
and
made.
OFW. Yeah, very vocational
Yeah,
and very.
yeah, right. And I think that's part of the problem too. But I think that you're definitely right. That the biggest problem really lies in an elite that basically is floating out there and doesn't realize that it has a duty to the rest of the country. But then that's not that much different from other countries, which just means that, and maybe this is another topic, is that um, progressives really, really need to get their act together to realize why have how can we turn these things around so that we can promote progressive economics, progressive politics, and a progressive culture. And so that's why I think that this is not going to last. I think what's happening right now is, in fact, that people realize that this dynastic warfare that's happening is, just uh, taking the country further and further down, and that at some point people realize that, hey, they really have to do something about changing the basic political and economic structure of this country, as well as the political and cultural attitude. So my sense is that right now people are looking at the dynastic conflict between the Marcoses and Duterte as a spectacle, but it's not going to be always that way. At some point, people will realize that, hey, why should we take sides between these two when they represent the same corrupt politics? So I think that day will come. I'm confident in our people that they will come.
Well, then, obviously, the last point here is again,
Yeah, sure.
what must be done? Let's go very Herzen. I won't say Lenin, baka ma-detect tayo. Herzen who started, and then I mean, what must be what should be done? Kasi the way I look at it, Walden, is well, we're comfortable with this between the two of us, and I hope the rest of our audience are appreciating what's happening here. Essentially, we have this hegemonic bloc, right, in the Philippines, right, which not only
Sure.
controls the commanding heights of the economy, which is not only in bed with the global superpower, although that is kind of up for grabs, as we discussed a while ago extensively, but they have also overseen the creation of these whole systems, right, Althusserian systems, in fact, whereby essentially citizens are not empowered to fully realize their rights as citizens, right? And you have this whole popular culture that constantly reinforces essentially, a sense of fatalism. Or worse, a sense of i-popcorn na lang natin yan. Let's just see how the house burning down and see it as an entertainment. When in fact, what we're seeing is tragic. It's a tragedy what's happening to our country. It's
Mhm.
absolutely a tragedy. It's a mockery of our country, what's happening. How can we fight back against that? Well, then, because obviously it has to be on multiple front. You and I keep on talking about at least industrial policy and trade policy. We have to fix that. But that's just one technocratic fix.
Mhm.
We
Mhm.
need a cultural and educational pushback too, right?
Yes, definitely.
Critical thinking that
Mhm.
allows our citizens to be truly citizens in
Mhm.
the full sense of the word, not just a bunch of people to be recalled every 2 to 4 years for elections.
Sure.
Because our citizens are only citizens during election time, right? That's how they're treated by the elite.
Mhm.
I know this is a long conversation, Walden, but I just want people to understand where you and I are coming from. I think the reason I'm saying this, Walden, is people watch my vlogs and me and Ronald and all we make fun and all of that. But I think people have to realize we are serious people here. We
Mhm.
understand there's some serious fundamental
Sure.
problem at the
Mhm.
level of even discursive level.
Mhm.
And honestly, yung humor na ginamit namin, sometimes it's a bit off. I understand, whatever, my Konya accent, whatever. But I hope people understand it's so hard to figure out what is the counter-hegemonic bloc we can create to give this country a chance to make our
Mhm.
citizens full citizens, Walden? And and
Mhm.
and I'll tell you what, again, this is not because it's I'm absolutely thankful to having had people like you in my life, Walden. Obviously, as people can see, we don't agree on a number of issues, probably on the whole US-China conflict. We have divergence of thoughts. But in terms of moral clarity of what we need para sa ating mga kababayan, what rights they deserve, the egalitarian system we deserve, what is a true democracy. I've been really privileged to have cross paths with people like you, Alden, and believe me, this I'm sure there are so many people way better than me, right, who have also been touched by the progressive values that you have passed down. Again, this in spite of our disagreement on certain geopolitical issues, among other things. But Walden, I want to ask you, Sensei, how can we create that counter-hegemonic block to help people really embrace critical thinking? And obviously, this podcasting and vlog is a small part of that.
Well, I think you put your finger right into what is needed is how do we create this counter-hegemonic, multi-level, multi-pronged block. I mean, we, uh, and I think part of it is really throwing challenges to the elites. For instance, around let's get a debate going about neoliberalism and bring people into it and bring ordinary people into it, ordinary students into it. That, you know, let's talk about industrial policy. Let's talk about culture and movies and the state of democracy. What is democracy all about? Because right now, uh, people are definitely disillusioned if they think that democracy is just going to the polls every 3 years, because that's the way that they've been uh, taught, and this has been institutionalized. I think that we really need a real democratic revolution. Let's bring democracy and its essence back to the people from the kind of corrupt electoralism that we have at this point in time. Now, of course, we cannot, I mean, we have to engage in elections, but we have to raise the level. And this is where progressives and liberals at this point in time, while, in this coming 2025 elections, the most important thing they can do is to get the level of discussion beyond just this question of mudslinging in terms of you're corrupt, they're corrupt, they're corrupt, they're corrupt, and bringing this back to really, what do we mean by people's power? What do we mean by empowerment? So if we can get in various fora that kind of discussion going, then it can develop some kind of a momentum. And I think that's why I said earlier, that this dynastic war might just be the tipping point for people who said, oh my God, what is this really what democracy is all about? Having these two factions fight each other for power. So I think we should take advantage of this tipping point in various ways through the media, through your show and others, and through the 25 elections to raise the level of political literacy in this country. So I fully agree that that's really the challenge. How do we get people to really understand what democracy is about, and that it's not just electoralism, it's not just finger pointing, it's not just dynastic warfare, but the empowerment of citizens. So, and I'm so glad that we have this podcast that you have, as well as your television and
Little gigs
presentations
here
and
and there.
others.
Little gigs
You know,
here. Yeah.
yeah,
I know many people, throw shades at me and all of that, but I hope they understand how difficult it is to
yeah,
smuggle in progressive ideas into against
yeah,
this
yeah,
hegemonic order. I just hope
yeah,
some
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not easy, Walden. I'm trying really my best here. I'm really trying my best.
And I applaud you for it, and I'm don't and I think that we things will move. You just keep on pushing, things will move. Yeah.
Oh
And
yeah, I'm having fun. Don't worry,
there,
Walden. I'm having fun. It's not like I'm not having
yeah,
fun.
sure. But let's put it this way, Richard. The 1960s and 1970s up to the 1980s, we had a real uprising of not only political uprising, but an uprising in thinking. We had a revolutionary generation. It wasn't always like this. So there might be a pendulum swing so that we go back to an era in which youth, begins to become ambitious again in terms of changing society. I do believe that that era is going to come. It might not come within the next few years, but definitely things can go on like they are at this point.
Interestingly, I just remember I ended yung book on Duterte, right? I wrote the Philippines, like Gramsci's Italy, is caught in an interregnum, struggling to anchor itself somewhere between strongman populism, autocratic nostalgia, and an element of democratic resistance, with no clear resolution on the horizon. The Philippines has entered a twilight zone. I'm reading this in 2024. It's even more poignant now, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But precise in that moment of rupture, I think we need this kinds of understanding. I'm probably I won't be surprised. Some people are shocked here to suddenly see me using all of this very post-Marxism. But I hope people understand. We need a framework. Hindi pwede yung bara-bara lang na solusyon. People are think, oh, charter change, everything will be fine. Federalism, everything will be fine. Change
Mhm.
lang the president, everything will be fine. I don't know, change the name of the country. No, it's a complicated
Sure.
thing because the whole system has a problem, and we
Mhm.
need systematic change,
Mhm.
and we need to do it obviously, Walden, in a non-violent, in a pluralistic and participatory manner. One of the things I respect about your works, Walden, is your constant emphasis on participatory democracy, meaning hindi mo kailangan ng PhD or professor or Englishero or whatever para magkaroon ka
Sure.
ng boses pagdating sa self-governance, no? Pagdating sa issue ng, participatory budgeting, for instance, right? I mean, this is really one of the things I appreciate. Well, I know you're tired. This was a long conversation. It came late in the day. Hopefully, this is just the beginning of a series of conversation we want to have because next year is going to be elections in the Philippines. Next year is going to be a second Trump. So please take care of yourself, Walden. Stay strong. You are a great inspiration to a lot of people. And I like it that we're disagreeing and people can see that, a sensei and a student can disagree and do it in a very respectful manner. But absolutely, we're on the same page, Walden, when it comes to industrial policy and the bankruptcy of the Philippine technocracy, to be honest about it. Kaya ang dami natin, alam mo, Walden, ang dami ko mga haters dahil kay Ronald. Dinagdagan mo pa yung mga haters ko from economic side. Parang, ang dami ko ng
Yeah.
kalaban. But it is what it is.
Well, the more hate mail you get, that means you're doing something right. So I'm basically, Richard, I've had so many people, that have hated me, but we're still here. But we've also have gained people who have come to our side, and I would imagine that we just keep on trying. Sabi nga nila, parang kanyan, we keep on rolling the boulder uphill. And at some point, we're going to get to the hill. Sisyphus will get to the hill, and the boulder won't keep on rolling down anymore.
Yeah, hopefully we go from Greek to something different, more Scandinavian. Like we
Yeah, right.
Viking it to the
Right.
other side. Enough of this. tragedy. Salamat, Walden, and looking forward to talk to you soon.
Yeah.
I know you're not a particular religious person, so all I'm gonna say is have a lovely time with your beloved ones in these vacations,
Yeah.
and advance Happy New Year, and God willing, inshallah, catch up with you soon.
Yes, and let me just and also, Richard, that I think many people probably know him, but many people have not heard about him. But maybe they should also look into the life of the person who departed yesterday,
Yeah.
Dodong Manso, because he was really an inspirational figure, precisely promoting paradigms and perspectives that are very important for our people.
Yes, actually, well, maybe we should do a search that talks about Dodong Nimenzo's
Yeah.
legacy, including talking to his widow, Princess. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
he spent time with the other week. Maybe I'll ask, is Ronald a credible person to talk about these issues?
Yeah,
Is
of course. Yeah.
yeah, because it looks like every time I talk to a progressive, parang sige na nga si Ronald. It's like I thought I'm dodgy. Apparently, Ronald is dodgier than me. So it's good. It's good. I think we're doing something right here.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Salamat.
Have Ronald there. Okay.
Salamat,
Yeah.
Sensei. Talk to
He
you soon.
definitely will, yeah, Ronald will stir up ideas, and he'll do it partly with comedy. So he's your ideal interviewee.
I'm not
Okay.
sure partly lang. I think it's like 80% humor, 20% political.
Substance. Well,
Salamat.
maybe. Okay.
Salamat.
Okay. Sige. Bye-bye.
Baka,
Take it
baka may
easy.
masabi ka, Walden. Sige, good night.
Okay. Bye-bye. Right.
Salamat.